House Bill 7042, which many of us have significant concerns over. And I want to say that this amendment that is being offered currently, I think, is a way to take a step in the right direction. And if it was adopted on this particular bill, I don't know that it would improve this bill to the point of being able to support it, because it is indeed a toxic and dangerous bit of policy that will only end up creating more problems for the state of Connecticut and its residents, and not do a single thing to increase the safety of any single person in the state. However, this amendment will. This amendment actually will make a difference. I've been listening all day, and there's been a lot of conversation about public safety and crime, and particularly crime involving firearms and how to deal with these things. And there is no question we have a problem in this state. Every night when I leave here and I'm headed home, I almost get run over by somebody on the highway because I think there is a lot less respect for law enforcement, particularly traffic enforcement, than there's been in a number of years. And there's a reason for that. Frankly, it's not by accident that the amount of crime and lawlessness, particularly on our roads, has increased. That's a direct result of policies that come from this legislature. And not just policies, but also an entire feeling, in fact, that's been impressed upon the nation, and the divide over whether or not people actually appreciate the work that police officers do, whether they actually believe that police officers are a benefit to our state and cities and various communities throughout. And I certainly do. But I think it's shameful that in some places across this nation, police have been vilified. There's been attempts to defund the police, to claim that they are somehow a problem in our society. And again, I'm a civil libertarian and somebody who's into small government. So I'm actually one of the first people to be cautious about expanding the powers of law enforcement, and have stood very often with people who might want to rein in the authority and power for police to do certain types of listening in with various devices without warrants and things like that. This is the type of policies that I've been in part of negotiations over the recent years where I might not have been on the same side. But I've always respected the police officers that do their job and put their lives on the line every day to keep us safe. And I've tried in my role as a state senator to make sure that I vote to show my support for people that are willing to take on that risk and put their bravery on the line for the rest of us. I mentioned that there's a reason why the quality of law enforcement is declining in our state, and it's not just this national divide over our appreciation of law enforcement professionals. It's also a bunch of policy. I was first elected back in 2010, and shortly thereafter, in 2011, the legislature passed Public Act 11-51, which reinstituted risk reduction credits. This is good time off credits, effectively, that ended up reducing the sentencing time for people serving criminal prison sentences. And shockingly, this bill, I remember debating it and voting on it in the House, and I remember me and my Republican colleagues down there offering amendment after amendment, trying to at least peel back some of the worst crimes for criminals with gun violence associated crimes, with sexual assault related crimes. And sadly, all of our amendments were defeated one after another. And over the years, in fact, I think maybe even on this bill, we have an amendment actually filed. I don't know if it'll be called, to change the risk reduction credit program so that it no longer applies to people with gun violence or sexual assault crimes, things that should have been reversed long ago. In 2012, the legislature passed, again, mostly on a party lines, the expanded traffic stop data bill, which required a lot of data to be provided based on traffic stops, based on race and gender and so forth. But this bill, while it did some good things, it also made it more difficult for prosecutors to have juveniles' cases transferred to adult court and limited the prosecution of repeat offenders. Anyone's wondering why the number of car thefts has risen over the last decade, I would say this is one of those key ingredients in why that has happened. We repealed the death penalty in 2012. That was not a party line vote, but I voted against that. In 2015, the Second Chance Society bill passed. This was a bill that reconstructed the Board of Pardons and Paroles. It allowed for expedited pardon process without a hearing unless the victim requests one. And we know that we've had significant problems with the Board of Pardons and Paroles ever since. We had a rash of massive reductions in sentences in the last couple of years that happened. And I remember reports of, something in the neighborhood of 70 or 75 individuals who had a decade or more shaved off their prison sentences. These things are sending a message into our state. It is a message that in Connecticut, we do not punish our criminals like we once did. In 2015 also, a bill, Public Act 15-183 passed, eliminating the automatic transfer of juveniles aged 14 to 17 charged with certain felonies. In 2018, we created the community-based and diversion system and school-based system for juveniles, capped the length of juvenile probation to 30 months, and eliminated the juvenile training school. Again, another thing that has probably contributed to the amount of juvenile crime in our state. More recently, in 2019, we had the expansion of the Trust Act, which we just revisited again this week. A policy that sends a terrible message that we are going to protect not just people in the country and in the state unlawfully, but criminals that are in our state unlawfully. In 2020, we came in for a special session, and on more or less party lines, once again, the majority passed the Police Accountability Act, something that absolutely 100% can be said to have contributed to the decline in the quality of our law enforcement by imposing restrictions on our law enforcement in their ability to do consent searches, to take away qualified immunity, putting police officers in danger of becoming personally liable for their actions on the job. And then in 2021, the majority passed the Clean Slate Law, effectively erasing criminal records for criminals in our state. In 2021 also, there was a bill to reduce the area of drug-free zones around schools. And in 2022, there was the PROTECT Act, which effectively changed the tools for corrections officers in our prison systems across the state. These are just some of the bills that have changed policies significantly in the state of Connecticut over the last 10 or 15 years, which have resulted, I think, in a reduction in the amount and quality of law enforcement going on in the state of Connecticut. So when we're looking around and we're wondering why things have changed, it's because we are changing the environment with the change in policies that are happening at our state capitol. And something needs to change if that's the case. Earlier today, when Senator Kissel was speaking on the bill, he reminded me of the response right after the terrible tragedy that occurred in Newtown, and how the legislature had this immediate reaction that we must do something, which, in my view, responding immediately to a tragedy with this idea that you have to do something is not always the best answer. You should stop and think before acting, before making policy, because all that resulted from that, in my view, is bad policy that we've been trying to dig out from under ever since. It was funny, though, because I was listening to Senator Kissel talk about how right after that tragedy occurred, the legislature decided to establish these 3 giant committees made up of the ranking members and chairman of all of the various other committees. And I, of course, was the ranking member of the insurance committee at the time, and I got assigned to the mental health portion of the policy-making process after, in response to the Sandy Hook tragedy. There was a portion that was dedicated to gun violence, one to school security, if I remember, and then one to mental health. And I'll never forget that we were asked to go down and participate in a public hearing at Sandy Hook High School. And this is only a few days after that terrible tragedy. And they set us up on the stage in the high school auditorium, all these lawmakers sitting there. And I remember sitting on the stage with my colleagues, and folks would come up to the podium and tell their stories. I have to tell you, it was one of the saddest days that I've experienced in my life for several reasons. One, it was terrible to listen to how distraught and upset the people in that community were over what happened. And it affected everyone. There's no one that I know of that did not feel for the people that lost their children, and just the incredible sorrow that was just floating in the air for a long period of time after that. But one of the other things that was so upsetting about that experience for me is I was sitting on that stage with my colleagues, and if you know anything about the legislature, you should know that if there's a public hearing and people are testifying in front of that hearing, it is the responsibility of the members of the legislature that are on that panel to listen, to search for facts, to ask questions. But that's not what happened that day. What happened is all of these lawmakers kept standing up and clapping for each person that got up and spoke. And I understand it was an emotional time, and certainly there were some people that were worthy of a reaction. But people were applauding the call for policy changes that were not going to be effective ever. And they were just caught up in the moment. And I was surprised that my fellow lawmakers were caught up in the moment so much that they couldn't sit there and listen objectively and do their job as professionals who actually were trying to weigh what was good policy and what was not in an effort to try and fix the problem, if that problem was even fixable. And frankly, the problem is not fixable. We just had a mass shooting a few days ago in my district in the city of Waterbury, and no doubt we'll find out that the firearm that was used in that tragic, thankfully I don't think anyone has passed as a result, but I think 6 people were shot and injured. Thankfully, no one was killed, but the issue is really that firearm was no doubt illegally obtained. And clearly, all of that effort, all of these gun control bills that have been passed in the wake of Sandy Hook and almost every year since we have some new element, doesn't seem to change any of that, because, as was pointed out by some of my colleagues today, we never address the root cause. We never address the trafficking of legal firearms substantially. We never prosecute the criminals fully that are responsible for these things. It's always a series of policies that makes it harder for law-abiding people who've done nothing at all to maintain their freedoms and to own firearms and to continue to defend themselves and protect themselves, or to engage in the shooting sports or buy certain types of firearms. We pass laws criminalizing things that are victimless. They're creating victimless crimes, possession of this or that, identifying certain firearms by their superficial characteristics, not by whether they're actually dangerous or anything like that. It's an absurd way of lawmaking. And I've watched over the years as the majority and this governor and the previous governor have tried to take credit for the fact that somehow they've solved this mass shooting problem that happened. They've done no such thing. In fact, if anything, we've been lucky. We've been fortunate there hasn't been another terrible tragedy as a result, because we haven't done what needs to be done. I want to thank Senator Ciccarella, who made a very good point earlier about, the number of prosecutions that exists for the number of crimes involving firearms is pathetic. It is pathetic. We are not actually trying to dissuade anyone from engaging in these crimes at all, it appears. At any rate, this bill is more of the same. But the amendment that we are on right now that would create a grant program to put school resource officers in schools is near and dear to me. And this is why I brought up the issue of Sandy Hook to begin with, because the whole time that the majority was talking about how they were going to crack down on certain types of assault weapons and ban this and ban that, I kept on saying, why don't we do something that might be effective? Why don't we put school resource officers in schools? The only way to truly stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And that's what a school resource officer is. And for me, that's the policy that we missed out on back in 2013. And we've been working on it ever since. I'm not the only one. There's quite a few of my colleagues who put in bills every year suggesting that we try and create more ways to get more school resource officers in schools across our state. I believe that is a positive step forward. This amendment that would create such a grant program, I wholeheartedly endorse. It will certainly not fix the underlying bill, but I would love to see this become law as well. And I encourage my colleagues to support it. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you.
Senate Amendment Q, House Bill 7042, total number voting 36, total voting yea 11, total voting nay 25, absent not voting 0.